Hello and welcome to I'm Preaching, a podcast of homilies from St. John Chrysostom Parish. Today, Father Brian Zunbrum reflects on Luke chapter 17, verses 5 to 10. The Gospel reading for Sunday, October 5th, 2025.
I was in 8th grade when Columbine happened. I was a junior in high school when I watched planes plunge into buildings, and months from graduating high school as I watched bombs fall in Iraq. I was months away from graduating college when Virginia Tech happened, and I spent my summer after senior year driving through New Orleans and watching neighborhoods that had been obliterated by Katrina. I was finishing my final year in seminary when Sandy Hook happened, and when the world learned the name of Trayvon Martin. I was 30 years old when I buried my first 2 students who were murdered, when the violence that had swirled around me my whole life finally came home. And in the decade that has followed, the violence has seemingly become omnipresent, has it not? Attacks on synagogues, churches, mosques, and temples. Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Haiti, Syria, Afghanistan. Videos of political assassinations, of murders of unarmed civilians, of children in cages regularly circulating through our social media on the daily. Moments that have stayed with us as a culture through the years. The faces of children in an elementary school in Uvalde, the anguished cry, "I cannot breathe," the flames that scorched the Los Angeles landscape. And then there's the violence that stays off our news feeds. The domestic violence and abuse within too many of our homes. The wreckage left behind by a sea of opioids and fentanyl. The violence done by poverty and hunger, by exploitation and fear. I don't know about you, my friends, but I feel like our dear prophet Habakkuk is still speaking all these years later. How long, O Lord? For don't we too keep crying violence? Have we not witnessed the violence and destruction before us? Have we not experienced the strife and clamorous discord? And I can't speak for you, but I know I've prayed. I've said my rosaries and lit my candles. I have recited the names of the dead again and again and again. I have stood before congregations gathered in grief and anger and pain to speak words of life and comfort and strength. I have wept more tears than I can count over strangers, over possibility and promise and potential that was silenced. I have wept over former students whose lives ended in violence at the hands of another, at their own hands. I have wept over families whose lives were wrenched apart by violence, standing in the midst of the carnage and staring into an empty sky. And heaven knows I've raged against the indifference of far too many, against the callousness of those who traffic in weapons of war, against the greed of those who profit from our violence, against the despair that always feels like it's creeping in. But once the tears have stopped, my anger's burnt itself out, and my desperate prayers have faded to silence, I come back to these readings, to the clear commands. Wait for it. Bear your share of hardship. Guard this rich trust, a spirit of power and love and self-control. Do what was commanded. And so we must. We must be faithful to the promise that violence will not have the final word, that every sword will be beaten into a plowshare and every system overturned that does not give life to God's people. We must be faithful servants, keeping hope, bearing light, spreading peace, carrying the cross, sowing love. My friends, like so many of you, I have seen the power of the dark, but I choose to be light. I have known the power of violence, but I choose to sow peace. I have felt the power of hate, but I choose love instead. My prayer this night is that each of you can go forth and do the same. May God be praised.
Unpreachy is a production of St. John Chrysostom Parish in Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Visit us at sjcparish.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This podcast was produced by Brendan Lorden with music by Skytoes on Upbeat. Thanks for listening. Be well.